discuss what's going on. Not yet.
I'll just cut it at the beginning. It's easier to do this now that I remembered it.
Who's going to introduce Rachel?
Sounds like you.
You will?
I just trust me. You don't want me.
Isn't she kind of like your boss?
I wouldn't even. No, nope. She is, but I'm not introducing.
That's why he won't do it.
Okay, I vote Jonathan.
I can also introduce myself. I don't really care. I know most of the people on the call.
Okay. But maybe some Backman people don't know.
True, maybe not. Although I did look at who's coming and I have met all the ones that are there.
You saw who's coming? How do you mean? Like who accepted it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
How many accepted it?
17 when I looked yesterday.
Well, I resent the link to Lumin without the calendar invite, so hopefully somebody shows up that did not accept.
And then 5 say, I'm not sure with a question mark, which usually translates to no, but they didn't want to say no.
Exactly.
That's how that works.
I've done that.
Yeah. Same.
Hi, Molly.
Oh, good. Ed Leo's like, we are currently experiencing high case issues.
How was the eclipse for those that went to see it?
It was neat. I mean, it wasn't what's going to happen in April. It didn't get totally dark.
Yeah.
That just kind of got
weird.
And weird. Yeah. But it was really cool. I mean, they had a wedding. My husband's cousin had a wedding brunch at her house, and then she bought 100 pairs of eclipse glasses, and so everybody went outside and looked up at the sky.
That is so cool.
It was cool. Yeah, it was very cool. I think there was a lot of kids there, and they were all laying in the middle of the street on their backs.
Ooh, sorry, I'm going to interrupt before everyone gets on here. Can someone at the end ask everyone to send in their holidays and pictures to us just as a reminder, because no one's done it yet?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, back to programming.
Hi, Adriana.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do we want people to sign in to see attendees?
I'll keep track. I don't want to make them do anything. Since I'm not doing anything, I'll write down the names once we start.
All right. Look at you being so like proactive too. Will, should you put some like elevator music while we wait, or
I was just thinking that we need some music.
Some jazz.
That would make me leave a meeting if they had elevator.
Will, can you sing?
Either that or Rachel can start singing. You're a singer, right, Rachel?
There
I
you
am.
see.
But I'm not going to sing on this microphone.
It wouldn't do you justice.
No.
If Rachel doesn't sing, if she doesn't sing, I will sing. Or Jonathan, you can play the guitar, no? Like, yeah, but no, it's not gonna happen.
I'm getting a cat after work today, so the next time we have it, I can get my cat to sing.
He's gonna send meows, or what is he gonna send?
I don't know. I haven't found out what my cat can do yet, so
I hope he can meow.
What does a cat look like?
fall.
Tall?
Fall. Like literally their name is Maple because they've got orange, white, and like fall colors in their coat.
How old is the cat?
6 months.
Aww.
You're gonna be the crazy cat boy.
Yeah, well. I was gonna get a dog, but I can't do that till I move in May, so cat until then.
Are you fostering or are you keeping it?
I'll keep it and then find a dog that doesn't hate it.
I love all those videos of the animals, the different species that come together and love on each other. It's especially funny when the dogs are playing with the cats and the cat like completely fits in their mouth almost. I think it's so cute.
I love when it's like an obscure animal, like a duck or something, and a dog, or a deer and a dog.
There was one where the chick or the duck climbed all the way in the dog's mouth and the dog's got its mouth open like, what do I do now?
I've seen that one, yeah.
Well, that sounds like any day in my family, so I don't need to see those videos. All right, Rachel, I don't know, it's 12:02. I want to respect people's time. What do you think? Should we start or give another minute?
Yeah, I think we can get started.
All right.
I'm so excited for this, Rachel. I was looking at a little bit of what you're planning to present, and I'm like, yay, I can't wait to be a part of this.
Well,
This is something that I think is so important, and I was just like, oh, I've got to see this one. I'm really glad this topic is come up.
well,
Thank
no
you for being here, Terry.
no pressure, everyone. Hopefully I do it justice.
You will.
Well, I'll introduce myself. I think I know most of you that are on today. But my name is Rachel Ossie. I'm the Chief Development Officer here at Lumen. And the topic that we are talking about in today's Lunch and Learn, I've titled it Language Matters, focusing on the strengths of Lumen families. And this is really a conversation today about how much it means to be very specific about the words that we use when talking about our clients, when talking to the families that we work with, because the words that we use are really, really powerful. So I'll start there. Okay, so before we get into the more practical aspects of today's Lunch and Learn, I want to talk a little bit about how our brains work. So I'm going to start by asking a few questions. And at any point during today's conversation, if you want to put a question or response in the chat, you can. You don't have to feel obligated to. I think I can't see it on my screen right now, but if the chat is enabled, that would be great.
That's fine.
So many of you probably opened the Zoom call today and saw your face on the screen just pop up right in front of you. Did you immediately notice how great your hair looks? Or did you immediately notice one blemish on your face and wonder if everyone else sees it too? Or let's imagine that you have lunch with a friend. You're having a lot of fun with your friend, and your friend says one thing during the entire hour and a half that you're together that really bothers you. Do you spend the rest of the day thinking about how much fun you had together, or do you let that one comment bother you? Like, what did she mean by that? Is that really how people see me? What's wrong with me? And I mean, I think we've all been there. We tend to think over and over and over again about the negatives instead of remembering the positives. And that is how our brains work. And that's how our brains are designed to work. There's a neuropsychologist named Rick Hansen that says the mind is like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. The negative sticks to us, the positive kind of slides off. So over the course of human development, focusing on the negatives actually worked in our favor. Back in the prehistoric days, humans who were better able to notice threats and danger had a higher rate of survival. But this tendency also sets us up completely unintentionally to develop biases against others. So we start to have issues with this negative positive thing when the facts of a situation don't totally agree with the negative bias that we've developed. In many cases, the brain picks up on negative biases or negative associations through our culture, through the media, through our experiences, and even through conversations that we have with other people. I have a short list of some negative associations that we hear all the time in our culture, and this is just a handful. And I'd like you to think, have you ever heard statistics like the ones that I'm going to share now? 1 in 3 Black men will go to prison in their lifetimes. A third of single-parent households live in poverty. More than 50% of Latino workers have no paid sick leave. These types of statistics are all over the news. We can barely avoid them. And they are facts, but they're also only part of the larger story. On the flip side, how many of us routinely hear facts like the following? Black fathers more involved with their very young children on a daily basis than fathers of any other racial or ethnic group in the United States. The number of businesses owned by Black women grew by a stunning 164% in the past 10 years. Between 2020 and 2040, 70% of new homeowners will be Latino. And personally, I didn't know any of these statistics. They didn't sound familiar to me before I put together this presentation. And that's not to say that I hadn't seen them before. I might have. It's just that my brain and all of our brains tend to remember those negative things instead of remembering those positive things. So even technology has picked up on the negative associations in our culture. And that's because artificial intelligence and technology actually learn from human behavior and associations. And so they pick up on this as, part of their design. So here are a couple of examples of that. In 2013, researchers found that Google Translate, when it was translating from the following phrase from English to Turkish, the phrase is, she is a doctor, he is a nurse. When it translated it, it flipped the genders automatically to say he is a doctor, she is a nurse, because Google had learned to associate men with being doctors and women with being nurses. A different study, also in 2013, found that Google AdWords would show crime-related ads if you went in and searched a name that sounded African American. And you might say, well, that was 10 years ago. What about now, right? So I went in last week and I did a little experiment with Shutterstock. This is an image library that's used by millions of businesses and websites to buy images. So I typed in the word rich, and here is the very first page of images that came up through the Shutterstock algorithm when I typed rich. What do you notice about the people in all of these images? They are all white. And I actually accidentally downloaded 14 pages of this. And I would say probably about 95% of the images were white as well. And here's what came up when I searched poor. Very first page. And what do you notice here? Most of the images here are people of color, and many of them are children. So is Shutterstock inherently bad? Is the computer system choosing to be purposely biased against people of color? No, it's not. But its search algorithms learned from human associations. And this is a mirror of how many people over a long period of time have thought about rich versus poor, regardless of their better or conscious intention. The rich versus poor images are just an illustration of a larger issue, which is that our tendency to associate negative traits, like having very few economic resources, is closely tied to perceptions of class and race. Again, this is not something that we necessarily intend to do at all. It is, however, something that we can consciously change just by being aware of the words that we use to describe others, and also being aware of the words that we use to describe our work. Lumen is an organization that serves many people who have struggles in their daily lives. Those struggles could be related to income, substandard housing, racial inequities, immigration status, mental health needs, family instability, and many others. And let's be honest that every single one of us also has our own daily struggles as well. All of these struggles are tied strongly to negative associations in our culture. And whether we mean to or not, it is often easy to assign labels to other people based on the challenges that they face instead of on who they really are. And this brings me to the main point of the Lunch and Learn today, which is that defining people by their challenges stigmatizes them. So we're going to talk now about how do we flip the script? How do we start defining people by their strengths and talking about them using their strengths instead of leading with the challenges that they face? So how do we change the narrative? First, we focus on strengths, human strengths, instead of allowing our brains to automatically embrace negative bias. And this is so important. When we describe our work by starting with other people's weaknesses, and I'll give a couple of examples of this in a minute, it may inspire sympathy. People might want to help, right? But the danger in that is that it reinforces stereotypes and it makes people feel less than. Another way that we can change the narrative is by telling stories that center people first instead of exploiting their identities. And I'll give an example of this. And then finally, by asking people how they want to talk about themselves. If we could put the stories in their own words, wouldn't that be more powerful? There's a quote by a man named Brian Stevenson that says, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And I think we can go beyond that and say that we are more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Everyone's gone through difficult times in their lives, but not everyone is labeled with that struggle for the rest of their life. There's a common saying that I've heard a lot of educators and parent coaches say at Lumen, which is that children do the best they can. Meaning that if children are struggling, there's a specific issue or issues that need support. And the same is true of everybody else too, adults as well. No one sets out in life wanting to fail. Everyone wants to succeed. If we can approach our work and how we describe our work to others by leading with the idea that everyone's doing their best and that we are providing the resources and support so that they can accomplish more incredible things that they might not otherwise have the capacity to accomplish alone, it changes the narrative completely. So let's take each of these issues and look at them individually. This is a short video that I'd like you to watch. Hopefully it works. From a really incredible man named Travion Shorters. And he talks specifically about how nonprofit organizations may unintentionally label the people they serve and why that's a problem. And this is just about a minute long.
Muted.
We can't hear the audio, Rachel.
Oh, okay.
We have to share audio screen.
Share audio screen?
Like the host has to be able to share the audio.
Okay.
I'll remember how to do that.
Let me see if I can figure it out.
When it opens the
Just a
share
second.
window,
Yeah.
in the bottom, there's a little box, Rachel, that says share computer audio. So just click on that one. So when it opens the window so you can decide what to share in the bottom. You see that?
No, I see a different thing right now. Hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second, see if I can figure it out again. Oh, I see it now. Okay, let's try it. Okay, let me see if I can go to the beginning.
The thing about philanthropy
Yep.
is whether we mean to or not, we have a very negative message towards the people that we say we want to help. I don't run around believing I'm an at-risk this or a low-income that or a high poverty, high crime. Like, no one carries around those labels thinking that's how I'm going to face the world, right? Because I know it's not intentional. But the thing about having a stigmatizing narrative in terms of the way you relate to a person is it automatically sets them in a place where they are being denigrated for the most part. Intentional or not doesn't matter, you know. They're being denigrated. A friend of mine used to say, if I'm crossing the street and you see me and you run me down with your car because you hate me, that's terrible. But if I'm crossing the street and you're not even paying attention and you run me down with your car, it doesn't make much difference to me. So the fact that you didn't mean to do it is irrelevant to my experience. Start off recognizing that people had aspirations before you showed up. Start off recognizing that people had value before you showed up. Tap into that value, and as much as you're willing to engage with them that way, they'll be willing to engage with you that way. And now we can build together.
And I'll say that this website that they had, BeMeCommunity.org, has some really, really great videos that Travion Shorters has put together. So if you're interested in more, there's quite a few other things that he's put together. Okay, so we're going to talk about what is some language that we can use to describe our work in a really productive way that focuses on the strengths of people. So the overarching idea here is thinking, instead of they need help, let's think we can solve this problem together. And here are a couple of examples here. So where you see focused on weakness, another way of saying this is deficit frame. So leading with the deficit, leading with the weakness. Where it says focused on strength, that's also called asset framing or strengths-based language. So the strengths-based language says we can help people meet their inherent potential. We can help people meet their potential. The weakness-based framing says there's something wrong with this person and we are the ones to fix it. So here are a couple of examples. Some of these are relevant to women, some of these are not. Let's look at the first one. So a weakness, something that's focused on weakness. We help at-risk youth in high crime neighborhoods. It makes it sound like the youth are the ones with the problem, right? The youth are the ones who are at risk. But what we're really doing is we help young people overcome obstacles and achieve their dreams. We're not pretending that they don't have struggles in our life, but we are showing that they have the potential to overcome those struggles. Next, we help homeless people. Well, let's think about why are people homeless, right? They weren't born homeless. They didn't all decide that one day they didn't want to have a house. We help provide solutions for people who've been priced out of affordable housing. We help victims of domestic violence. The word here is victim. Victims of domestic violence. That's the weakness. A strengths-based way of saying that could be we provide resources for survivors of domestic violence. Because you're showing that that person has been a survivor. They're a person that has fought to get past it, right? It gives them some strength. And finally, focused on weakness, we teach struggling parents how to raise their children. Versus focusing on the strength, we partner with parents to ensure that every family has access to the resources they need to thrive. So the person is not the weakness. There are weaknesses in our society, right? And we have to partner with that person to overcome those. I'd also like you to notice that it does usually take more words to define people by their strengths instead of their weaknesses, and that's okay. I think if we have to use more words to talk about others with dignity and to accurately explain the context of their stories, then that's what needs to happen. Now let's talk about storytelling a little bit. Let's pretend that the family in this photo are Lumen clients. They are not, they're just an image. But let's pretend that we're telling the story of this woman and her experience with our programs. So I'm going to start by telling her story from a deficit or weakness-based approach. And I'm not suggesting that anyone is describing clients like this right now. I just want to be clear. Claudia is a single teen mother who dropped out of high school when she got pregnant. She has no support from the baby's father and was struggling to raise her daughter alone. She enrolled in Lumen's home visiting program. Our staff taught Claudia how to be a better mother and also made sure that she and her baby were signed up for food stamps so they had enough to eat. Thanks to Lumen, Claudia and her baby had their basic needs met so that her baby could get a better start to life. Now, all of those things are true about Claudia, right? She is a single teen mother. She did have to drop out of high school. But by leading with that, we're putting Claudia in a position of weakness. And so let's retell that story with a strengths-based approach and see how it comes off. Claudia had always wanted to be a parent, but when she found out she was pregnant with her daughter, she realized she needed additional help. A friend recommended Lumen's home visiting program to her, and she was eager to gain additional knowledge about her baby's development. Lumen's staff worked with Claudia to make sure she had the resources she needed and were able to find ways to support Claudia in her parenting journey. Claudia has become an amazing advocate for her daughter's education and is passionate about helping other parents by working to become a parent educator herself. So what we're doing is we're showing here how Lumen can step in the gap. When the system is failing Claudia, we're showing how Lumen can support her rather than leading with all of the things that are wrong with Claudia and wrong with her life. And it boils down to the idea that Claudia always had the capacity to be an incredible parent and to be a leader in the community. She just needed a little bit of support to reach her potential, rather than Claudia being painted as vulnerable and incapable of being a good parent without Lumen. Another thing that we can do is ask families for accurate language. How would they describe themselves? So we partner with families all the time, and we ask them to put their stories in their own words. And I'll give one example of that. I recently spoke with a former parent who was extremely positive about her child's experience in both the home visiting and classroom programs here at Lumen. And when I asked her to put the impact of Lumen's work in a couple of sentences, she said something absolutely beautiful. And she said, when I had my child, I was overwhelmed by the opinions of older family members about how I should raise her. I had my own opinions, and I didn't agree with a lot of what my family said, but I didn't feel that I could stand up for my beliefs. My parent educators showed me that my instincts were correct, that I was a good parent, that I could trust myself to know what was right for my child. That gave me the courage to be a stronger person. Now my daughter is older, I've become very involved in her school and in supporting her because I felt empowered enough early on to become a leader. And so putting it in those words, how it made her feel, is so much a more powerful way to tell a story. The parent was always committed to being a good parent. And that's why the program was so effective for her, because it brought out something in her that was there all along. Oh, yikes. Okay. Ask for permission to share stories. This is something that is going to be relevant to different staff members, certainly is relevant to me, but if we have stories that we want to share publicly, we always need to ask for permission. And part of that is saying, here's how I would put your story in words. Do you agree? Excuse me. My allergies are acting up. So allowing parents and children, depending on their age, to review the language that we use before using this. Ask it, is this how you describe your experience? And be sensitive to difficult topics. One of our staff members here recently shared a story about a conversation with a parent, and in the process of offering resources to the parent, she mentioned that the parent was eligible for the resources because she was homeless. And the parent was very upset because even though she was living with a friend or family member temporarily, the word homeless was really traumatic for her. She did not see herself as homeless. And that is because the word homeless has a lot of stigma around it, right? So be aware when we're using this terminology with others, how is this going to make our clients feel? And how would it make you feel if it were applied to you? You know, how can we be really sensitive to things that are emotionally difficult? Anticipate what parts of conversations may be difficult for families and prepare your words to address it. And this brings me to the next thing, which is limitations. For those of us who have to work with government or private grants or are required to collect data in certain ways, there is no way around using deficit language in those frameworks, right? Because so often we are asked to collect information like, what is the number of at-risk youth? What is the number of homeless families? The number of children in poverty? We can't stop collecting that information because it's deficit-based, and that's just not realistic, right? But what we can do is we can work to ensure that just because the government or a funder asks us to paint a negative picture on our reports, that we don't let that affect how we talk about our families and to our families. We can choose to implement an asset framing approach wherever we're able to. And if possible, I mean, if we're in a position of power or we have some gravity in the conversation, we can try to discuss asset framing with those people in charge to encourage them to change the system. We can't make them do anything. I mean, we have to be able to get our funding where we get our funding, but we can also try to be that voice. Maybe we need to start reading. And then finally, just thinking about the golden rule here, and I think the golden rule for Lumen is, if I were a Lumen client, how would I want Lumen to talk about it? And that's really what it comes down. How can we be really, really conscious of the needs and the emotions of the people that we're serving, of the people that we're talking about in public, and make sure that we are really leading with a human-based, strength-based approach in those conversations. Okay, and before we get into any questions and answers, please feel free to put your question in the chat, and I'll answer them as I'm able. I'm certainly not an expert, but I will do my best and will ask others to chime in. But I'd like to open up the floor to your questions. And I also have some language resources that I can send out after the session is over, if you'd like to do any further reading, or if you'd like some practical ideas of, well, how would I be able to say this differently, I can send this as well. I also just want to close by saying I realize that we are never going to be perfect in this endeavor, and that's not really what it's about. It's really just about the effort and earnestly trying. So I will close it there and stop sharing and take a look at your comments. Yeah, Charo brings up a great point, which is focusing on strengths has to be an intentional learning process for the brain, because she's absolutely right. From an evolutionary point of view, we are designed to detect what's wrong. So it has to be something where we really make effort to say, I am not going to let my brain get in the way. I am really going to make an effort to start with the strength instead of the weakness. Will says, how do we get donors to get used to strengths-based language? There is some interesting, there are some interesting studies that have been done, and I won't get too much into the fundraising rabbit hole here, but talking about, does it really make that much of a difference if you say something really negative in your fundraising appeal versus something that is more of a strengths-based approach? And it doesn't actually make that much of it, not a statistically significant difference. So we don't have to beg people necessarily by using difficult stories. We can really focus on the successes. And so that's what we're trying to do. What are the successes rather than the weakness? And another part of that is that people get tired of hearing bad news all the time. And if you go to them over and over and over again and say, okay, well, you know, let's pretend that, I don't know, if we were all working here for a food bank and we came back every year and said, okay, people still don't have enough food, people are starving over and over and over again, it's not going to be a compelling argument for people to give. Okay. Okay, so when asking a parent if they agree with the story about them, Molly says, So she thinks they're often grateful for how we have supported them, so they will say yes, even if they are not comfortable with all of it. How could you ask that question to get a more honest answer? I think that's a really good question, and it probably depends on the relationship, honestly. I mean, if we have a good relationship, we've been working with that parent for a really long period of time, I think we're probably going to get a more honest answer rather than being someone who doesn't really know them. Another thing that I had recently done kind of by accident that worked pretty well, I had asked a parent if they would be willing to write down a story. And I said, well, I'm not really comfortable with writing. And I said, okay, well, what if you told me your story and I wrote it down? And they said, yeah, that would work. So they came in and they sat down and just talked through their story. And then I turned it around and said, does this look accurate? And they said, yeah. So that was one thing that was pretty successful, working to transcribe their story.
Rachel, I'll just say that this is something that I've become increasingly aware of over time. And I think of the stories that I tell at our welcome celebration, for example. And ever since Camila Collins did her training with us, she helped me to reframe the way I tell those stories. So I'm focusing on the initiative that parents were taking. And this presentation is really helping me to think about this and take it to the next step, to the next level. I still think I have a lot of work to do on that, and I really appreciate your presenting this.
Well, and it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to go against sort of our knee-jerk reactions. So that is for sure. No worries, Charo. I see your comment from the library. Charo says that studies have found that people are more likely to repeat behaviors that are positively acknowledged than to stop behaviors they are criticized for. And that's really important, right? And that's true of children as well. When you choose to acknowledge the things that they're doing really, really well, they want to keep doing those things, right? And I'm sure the same goes for adults.
And also, for us, and I think I might say this in Spanish because I have or no, they're good. Talking about children with disabilities, no, when we do the screenings, we need to be super, super careful of how we talk to the parents. It's very sad that Charo can't talk because I'm sure she would have better examples than mine. But like, not to say to the parents, like, for example, if your child goes to PPCD or special ed, they might later join los niños normales, no? Like the normal children or regular children, because automatically you're telling them that their child is abnormal, right? In Spanish also, to use like a developmental delay in English sounds very technical and what it is. But in Spanish, the moment we say un retraso, it's like, what? So we need to be very careful. So for my staff, we need to talk about that and be very, very conscious of how we talk about with the parents and the homeless also, no? We have so many families living together one with the other, and that qualifies them as homeless, but that's not how we are to refer to them and about them. I think this is very valuable, Rachel. I don't know if you're sending, I've seen a lot of lists on the internet. I don't know if we can maybe send those resources, so we can practice how to talk about these things.
Yes, I do have those resources. And I don't know, I'll put a couple of them in the chat. This is probably the most useful one. The one that I just put in the chat is a style guide. It really goes through sort of what are terms that you can use that are sensitive to people and what are terms that are going to be upsetting, right? Or terms that are going to be leading with weakness, right? So disability is one of the sections in there, but there's a whole table of contents. So there are a lot of different options. I don't know, Ruthie, if you have one that, because this is obviously based in English, because these are English terms. I don't know if there is one for Spanish.
I will
if there
definitely
is, that'd be
search.
great.
I'll search because I found that list to be very helpful for me.
Mhm.
Like I just to read it and just get that muscle memory of, because we've been taught to use those terms that are not correct. So just to change that trend. So I'll search for something in Spanish definitely and send it over.
Okay.
I think it's really important what you were saying about how we ask the person how they, how they want to hear it, how they want to be described, because I think there are times when someone has come from a really difficult time and made it out of there that they're like, I was a homeless person, and they might want to take that as a former title just to show you how far they've come. So yeah, I think it's so important to see what, how that individual sees the situation and how they would want it described.
Absolutely. Well, and so much is so subjective, really, and the whole presentation is really just thinking about how people want to be talked about and talked to, right? So it's always leading with just asking them is going to be the best. All right. Well, if there are any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or email them. And if not, thanks for coming this afternoon and giving us a little bit of your lunch. Appreciate it. And have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Well, Rachel
Hmm?
left. I thought we were gonna talk. All right.
Oh, well, I thought we were too.
Yeah, I thought so too. All right. Bye. Well, bye, Jonathan. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.